Welcome to Sleeping History. This is a place for slow, quiet stories from the past, told gently, without urgency, and without distraction. If you enjoy falling asleep to long historical explanations, consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and turning on notifications. It helps the channel grow, and it means more peaceful nights like this one. Now get comfortable. Let your breathing slow and allow the details to drift as you listen. Tonight's story explores why being a peasant in medieval Europe was far more brutal than we often imagine. There's nothing you need to remember and nothing you need to focus on. Just listen and rest. Life as a peasant in medieval Europe was not defined by adventure or romance. It was defined by survival. For most people, every day began and ended with the same quiet concern: whether there would be enough food, warmth, and health to make it through another season. Peasants made up the vast majority of the medieval population, yet they owned almost nothing. Most were tied to land they did not control, working fields that belonged to a lord in exchange for protection and the right to live there. This system, known as feudalism, shaped nearly every aspect of their existence, leaving little room for choice or escape. Housing was basic and unforgiving. A typical peasant home was a single-room structure made from wood, mud, and straw, with a thatched roof that leaked in heavy rain. There was usually no chimney, meaning smoke from the fire drifted through the room before escaping through gaps in the roof. Over time, this filled lungs with soot and left walls darkened with residue. Privacy did not exist. Entire families slept in the same space, often alongside animals during colder months. Livestock were brought indoors not for comfort, but because their body heat helped prevent freezing. The smell, noise, and risk of disease were simply accepted as part of life. Food was a constant source of anxiety. Peasants lived on a diet dominated by bread, porridge, and vegetables, with meat being rare and usually reserved for special occasions. Hunger was not unusual. A poor harvest, a harsh winter, or a lord demanding more grain than usual could push families to the edge of starvation. Bread itself was not always what we imagine today. It was coarse, dark, and often mixed with whatever grains were available, sometimes including seeds or ground husks. In difficult years, bread could be bulked out with ingredients that were barely edible, just to make it last longer. Work was relentless. From sunrise to sunset, peasants labored in the fields, planting, tending, and harvesting crops by hand. There were no machines to ease the burden. Every task required physical effort, repeated day after day, season after season, with little rest. Children worked almost as soon as they were able. By the age of 7 or 8, many were already helping in the fields, caring for animals, or performing household labor. Childhood, as a protected stage of life, did not exist in the way we understand it today. The land dictated everything. A good year brought modest stability. A bad year brought hunger, debt, and sometimes death. Floods, droughts, and early frosts could destroy crops entirely, and there was no insurance, no aid, and no guarantee of help from those in power. Disease was an ever-present threat. Medical knowledge was limited, and many illnesses were poorly understood. Infections that would be easily treated today could become fatal. Minor injuries could turn serious. Tooth infections, cuts, and burns were dangerous in a world without antibiotics. Hygiene was basic. Clean water was not always available, and waste disposal was crude. Villages were often surrounded by refuse, animal waste, and stagnant water, creating ideal conditions for illness to spread quietly and quickly. The law offered little protection. Peasants lived under the authority of their lord, who controlled local courts and punishments. Justice was not equal. A peasant accused of wrongdoing had few rights and limited ability to defend themselves. Punishments were harsh and public. Fines, physical punishment, or forced labor were common. Even small offenses could result in serious consequences. Fear of authority was woven into daily life, shaping behavior through quiet obedience rather than trust. Freedom was limited. Many peasants were serfs, legally bound to the land. They could not leave without permission, could not marry freely, and could not pass on property without approval. Their lives were inherited obligations, passed from one generation to the next. Travel was rare. Most peasants lived and died within a few miles of where they were born. The world beyond their village existed mostly through stories and rumors. Roads were dangerous, and leaving the protection of familiar land carried significant risk. Religion offered comfort, but also reinforced hardship. The church taught that suffering on earth could lead to reward in the afterlife. This belief helped many endure difficult lives, but it also encouraged acceptance rather than change. Festivals and holy days provided brief relief. On these occasions, work paused, food was shared, and communities gathered. These moments stood out precisely because they were rare, brief interruptions in an otherwise demanding existence. Old age brought no security. Those who could no longer work depended on family or community support. If that support failed, poverty became extreme. There were no pensions, no safety nets, and no guarantees. Despite everything, peasants endured. They adapted, learned, and survived within narrow limits. Their lives were not filled with constant misery, but they were shaped by uncertainty, physical strain, and a lack of control over their own futures. History often remembers kings, knights, and battles. But medieval Europe was built on the quiet labor of peasants, whose lives were spent working land, raising families, and enduring conditions that modern life rarely demands. And this was only one layer of their world. Seasonal change controlled a peasant's life more than any ruler ever could. Spring demanded planting, summer demanded endurance, autumn demanded speed, and winter demanded survival. There was no true off-season. Each part of the year carried its own pressures, and falling behind, even slightly, could mean hunger months later. Harvest time was especially unforgiving. Crops had to be gathered quickly before rain or frost ruined them. Long days turned into longer nights, with families working together under fading light. Mistakes were costly, and exhaustion was unavoidable. Taxes and dues took much of what peasants produced. Rent was paid not in money, but in grain, livestock, labor, or goods. Even after months of work, a peasant might keep only a fraction of what they grew. What remained had to last through winter and into the next planting season. Beyond rent, there were obligations. Peasants were often required to work the Lord's land for free several days a week. These labor services came before tending their own fields, meaning their personal survival sometimes depended on work done second. Women carried an enormous share of the burden. They worked the fields, managed the household, prepared food, raised children, and cared for the sick. Pregnancy was dangerous, childbirth was risky, and recovery time was minimal. Life resumed almost immediately. Child mortality was high. Many families lost children before they reached adulthood. This loss was common expected, and deeply painful, though rarely recorded. Survival often required emotional resilience as much as physical endurance. Clothing offered little protection from the elements. Peasants owned few garments, usually made from rough wool or linen. Clothes were patched repeatedly and passed down. In winter, cold settled into the body and stayed there, day and night. Shoes, when owned at all, wore out quickly. Many worked barefoot during warmer months, risking injury and infection. A damaged foot could mean lost work, and lost work could mean hunger. Violence was always close, even if it wasn't constant. Raids, feuds, and small conflicts affected rural areas more than cities. Peasants rarely fought in wars by choice, but were often caught in their path, losing crops, homes, or lives without being part of the conflict. Famine did not announce itself loudly. It crept in slowly. Smaller meals, fewer options, weaker bodies. By the time starvation was visible, it was often too late to escape. Entire villages could be affected at once, leaving no one able to help. Weather was unpredictable and unforgiving. A single storm could flatten fields. A dry summer could ruin everything. Peasants had no control over these forces, yet paid the price when they struck. Education was almost non-existent. Most peasants could not read or write. Knowledge was practical and passed verbally. How to farm, how to repair, how to survive. Ideas beyond the village rarely entered daily life. Entertainment was simple and infrequent. Music, stories, and games appeared during festivals or evenings, offering brief relief. These moments mattered because they were rare, not because they erased hardship. Aging brought uncertainty. Strength faded, but work demands did not. Those unable to contribute relied on family or charity. If neither was available, survival became fragile. Despite all of this, peasant communities formed strong bonds. Cooperation was necessary. Neighbors helped during harvests, sickness, and crises. Shared hardship created quiet solidarity. This resilience was not romantic. It was practical, learned, and enforced by circumstance. Peasants endured because they had to, not because life was gentle. And still, there is more beneath the surface of this world. More quiet pressures, more unseen limits, more reasons why medieval peasant life was far harsher than it appears from a distance. Illness did not arrive suddenly in medieval peasant life. It settled in slowly, often becoming part of daily existence. Persistent coughs, aching joints, and constant fatigue were common, especially among those who spent their lives working outdoors in cold and damp conditions. Nutrition played a quiet role in this decline. Diets lacked variety and essential nutrients. Deficiencies weakened immune systems over time, making peasants more vulnerable to disease. Recovery was slow, if it came at all. Medical care was limited and inconsistent. Most treatment relied on herbal remedies, prayer, or advice passed down through generations. Some remedies helped, others did nothing, and some made conditions worse. There was little understanding of infection or internal illness. Injuries were frequent. Farming tools were sharp and heavy, and accidents were unavoidable. A deep cut or broken bone could mean months of pain or permanent disability. Without proper treatment, even minor wounds could become life-threatening. Mental strain was rarely acknowledged, yet constant uncertainty took its toll. Worry about harvests, weather, and survival weighed heavily. There was little space to express fear or grief openly. Life demanded endurance, not reflection. Authority was distant, but ever present. Lords rarely visited peasant villages, yet their influence shaped every decision. Rules were enforced by stewards and officials who answered upward, not to the people they governed. The church was central to peasant life, offering structure and explanation. It marked time through holy days and rituals, but it also reinforced obedience, teaching that social order was divinely arranged and suffering had purpose. Superstition filled the gaps left by limited knowledge. Illness, crop failure, and misfortune were often attributed to curses, sin, or divine punishment. Fear of the unknown shaped behavior and belief quietly. Social mobility was almost impossible. A peasant was born into a role and expected to remain there. Skill and effort mattered, but only within strict boundaries. Ambition beyond survival rarely had room to grow. Marriage was practical rather than romantic. Families arranged unions based on labor needs and survival. Love might grow later, but stability came first. Women's choices were especially limited. Death was familiar. Funerals were common, brief, and close to home. Cemeteries filled slowly but steadily. Loss was processed quickly because life demanded continuation. Records rarely captured these lives. History preserved the names of rulers, not farmers. What remains are fragments, tools, homes, fields, quiet evidence of work repeated endlessly. Peasant life was not a single experience, but the pattern was consistent. Labor, obligation, uncertainty, and endurance. Comfort was rare, rest was brief, and control over one's life was minimal. Yet communities persisted. People adapted to narrow circumstances with skill and patience. They learned to survive in systems that offered little protection. This world did not feel brutal in moments. It felt normal. That normality is what made it so demanding. A life where hardship was expected and relief was never guaranteed. And still, there is more to uncover. More unseen limits, more quiet hardships, more reasons why peasant life in medieval Europe demanded constant resilience. Violence did not always come in the form of war, but it was never far away. Local disputes between lords could spill into peasant villages without warning. Fields were trampled, food stores seized, and homes damaged, often without compensation or protection. When wars did pass through rural areas, peasants were the most exposed. Armies lived off the land, taking grain, animals, and tools. Refusal was dangerous. Compliance meant survival, at least temporarily. Conscription was another risk. While knights and soldiers were trained, peasants could be forced into service during emergencies. Poorly equipped and inexperienced, they faced danger with little reward and no long-term support if injured. Travel restrictions further limited freedom. Leaving the village without permission could result in punishment. Even attending distant markets or visiting relatives required approval, reinforcing isolation and dependence. Justice was inconsistent and local. Laws varied from manor to manor, often depending on the temperament of the lord or steward. Punishments were designed to deter, not to rehabilitate. Public punishments were common. Fines, stocks, and physical penalties served as warnings to others. Fear maintained order more effectively than fairness. Marriage, inheritance, and even death involved fees paid to the lord. These payments reduced already limited resources and reminded peasants that even personal milestones were controlled by authority. Natural disasters were beyond preparation. Floods, fires, and storms destroyed homes quickly. Rebuilding was slow, and assistance was limited. Losses were often permanent. Isolation shaped perception. News traveled slowly and inaccurately. Many peasants had little understanding of wider political or religious changes until they directly affected local life. Language barriers also existed. Latin dominated official records and religious texts, while peasants spoke local dialects. This gap reinforced exclusion from decision-making and knowledge. Trust in systems was limited. Survival depended more on neighbors than institutions. Community cooperation was practical, not idealistic. Despite shared hardship, inequality existed even among peasants. Some had slightly more land or livestock, creating subtle divisions within villages. Festivals provided moments of release. Music, dance, and food briefly replaced routine. These events mattered because they reminded people they were more than labor. As time passed, routines became traditions. Endurance became expectation. Life did not improve quickly, but it continued. Peasant existence was shaped less by moments of crisis and more by constant pressure, physical, social, and emotional, applied quietly over a lifetime. This steady strain defined medieval peasant life more than any single event. And still, the structures surrounding them had deeper consequences yet to be explored. Imagine waking before sunrise, not because you choose to, but because waiting means falling behind. The air is cold, the ground damp, and the work has already begun in your mind before your body moves. This is how most medieval peasants started their days, already tired. A peasant's body was their only real tool. There was no backup if it failed. Strength meant survival, and weakness meant risk. Injury did not pause responsibility. Pain was worked through, not treated. Consider the fields themselves. They demanded attention regardless of weather. Mud clung to feet in spring, heat pressed down in summer, and wind cut through thin clothing in winter. The land never adjusted to the person working it. Food security was never certain, even in good years. Storage was basic, preservation unreliable, and pests constant. A mouse infestation or damp grain could undo months of labor silently, without warning. Now think about control. Peasants made decisions daily, but rarely meaningful ones. The biggest choices, where to live, who to serve, how much to give, were made for them long before they were born. Authority did not need to be present to be effective. Its rules were internalized. People learned what was allowed, what was dangerous, and what was pointless to question. Contrast this with the rare moments of movement. A traveling fair, a visiting preacher, a merchant passing through. These events briefly expanded the world, then disappeared, leaving daily life unchanged. Silence played a role too. Many struggles were endured without words. Complaints changed nothing. Endurance was safer than protest. Children absorbed this early. They learned limits before they learned hope. Skills were taught alongside obedience, shaping expectations from a young age. Now consider time passing. Years blurred, seasons repeated. Strength declined gradually. There was no ceremony for growing old, just less ability and the same demands. Peasant women experienced a different brutality. Their work was constant, but invisible. Their risks were higher. Their recognition was minimal. Survival depended on them, yet they held little authority. Death was close, but unremarkable. It was handled efficiently. Then life resumed. Grief existed, but so did necessity. Despite everything, people adapted. They found meaning in routine, pride in survival, and comfort in familiarity. This was not happiness as we define it, but it was stability within constraint. The brutality of peasant life was not loud. It was quiet, structural, and long-lasting. It pressed down slowly, shaping lives without dramatic moments. And there are still other pressures to uncover, less obvious but just as heavy, waiting just beneath the surface of medieval peasant life. Picture a winter that arrives early and refuses to leave. Snow settles into ruts in the road and stays there for weeks. Firewood runs low faster than expected. Meals grow smaller without anyone announcing it. This is not an emergency yet, just a quiet tightening of life. In these months, light is scarce. Days are short, and work happens in dim spaces. Smoke hangs in the air, stinging eyes and lungs. Cold becomes something you carry with you, even indoors, even at night. Now shift forward to spring. The ground thaws unevenly. Planting must begin whether the soil is ready or not. Delay risks hunger later. The body aches from winter, but the season allows no recovery. Summer brings its own pressure. Heat weighs heavily, especially during harvest. Sweat dries quickly, salt crusting on skin. There is no shade in open fields, and rest feels dangerous when work is unfinished. Autumn moves quickly. Crops must be gathered and stored. Everything depends on timing. A sudden storm can destroy what remains in the field. The urgency is constant, but rarely spoken. Between these seasons, there is no pause. Tools are repaired, animals are fed, food is preserved, clothing is mended again and again until the fabric barely holds. Consider the emotional weight of repetition. Doing the same tasks every year, knowing the outcome is uncertain, creates a particular kind of fatigue. Not sharp, but deep. Hope exists, but it is cautious. A good harvest brings relief, not celebration. It means survival has been extended, not secured. Peasant life rarely included moments of choice. It included responsibility without authority, labor without ownership, and risk without reward. When illness entered a household, it changed everything. Work redistributed. Children took on adult roles. Recovery was slow and sometimes impossible. Silence often followed hardship. There was no language for complaint that led to change. Acceptance was practical, not passive. Social hierarchy was visible everywhere. Castles and manors stood apart, physical reminders of distance between those who worked and those who benefited. And yet, peasants were not unaware. They understood inequality clearly. What they lacked was leverage. Their world was small by design. Narrow paths, familiar faces, limited horizons. Change came from outside, rarely from within. This constant narrowing of possibility shaped not only lives, but expectations. Survival became the measure of success. And still, there are more unseen forces shaping this existence. Pressures that worked quietly, shaping thought, behavior, and belief. Authority in a peasant's life was often invisible, but always felt. Orders did not need to be repeated. Customs, obligations, and unspoken rules shaped behavior more effectively than force. People learned early what could not be changed. Land was worked, but never truly trusted. A field that fed a family one year could fail the next, without explanation. There was no sense of progress, only cycles. Improvement was rare, and loss was always possible. Now consider sound. Medieval villages were not quiet in the way we imagine. Animals moved constantly. Tools struck wood and metal. Voices carried easily. Silence usually meant something was wrong. Smell was part of daily experience. Smoke, manure, damp earth, and unwashed bodies blended into an atmosphere that never fully cleared. This was normal, not remarked upon. Think about decision-making. A peasant chose when to wake, when to eat, when to rest, but not why. Larger decisions belonged to others. Life was reactive rather than planned. Festivals broke this pattern briefly. Color, noise, shared food, and laughter altered the rhythm of life. These moments mattered because they felt different, not because they changed anything afterward. Fear existed in specific forms. Fear of bad weather, fear of illness, fear of punishment, fear of being noticed for the wrong reason. It was a quiet awareness, always present. Trust was practical. Neighbors were allies because survival required cooperation. Conflict existed, but open hostility was dangerous in small communities. Now imagine aging into this life. Strength fades, but expectation does not. Work becomes harder without becoming optional. Pain becomes background. For women, time moved differently. Pregnancy, childbirth, and care, work created a cycle of risk that never fully ended. Survival was uncertain even in youth. Peasant faith was grounded, not abstract. Prayers were short and specific. Protection, rain, health. Belief was tied to need. Information arrived slowly and often too late. Changes in law, taxation, or authority could arrive suddenly, with no warning and no input from those affected. The brutality of peasant life was cumulative. No single moment defined it. It was shaped by pressure applied steadily over decades. This pressure limited imagination as much as movement. Life was endured, not expanded. And beneath all of this, more unseen constraints shaped how peasants lived, thought, and accepted their world. Imagine a village at dawn. Smoke curls from chimneys. Chickens scratch the ground. A woman kneads dough while a child lifts a bucket of water. Every motion has purpose. Every sound, a rhythm of survival. There is little idle time, and yet no urgency. Only a constant push forward. Work is exhausting, but never evenly distributed. Men may labor in the fields, but the home requires attention too. Washing, cooking, repairing. Every hour carries its own set of duties. There is never a moment entirely free from responsibility. Weather shapes more than labor. Rain can turn paths to mud that slows carts and makes travel dangerous. Sun can parch the earth and wilt crops. Storms can destroy months of effort in minutes. Peasants learned to read the skies, but they could not command them. Even in the forest or the meadow, danger lurks. Wolves or wild dogs threatened livestock. Poisonous snakes or insects could injure or infect. Nature demanded vigilance, even in quiet moments. Markets provided a brief shift. Goods from afar arrived slowly, and not always in sufficient quantities. Peasants might barter surplus crops for tools or cloth, but prices were set by merchants, and fairness was rare. Negotiation required experience and luck. Noise shaped daily life. The crack of whips, the hammer of tools, the clatter of carts, the barking of dogs, all were ever present. Silence was rare, and often alarming. Rest was simple. People slept on straw or mats, sometimes with animals for warmth. Dreams were fleeting because exhaustion did not allow long reflection. Sleep offered only temporary escape, never freedom from responsibility. Hunger taught patience. Meals were small and repetitive, seasoned only occasionally with flavor from herbs or rare meat. Variety existed mostly in imagination. Scarcity was a constant companion. Religious observance gave rhythm to life. Bells called people to mass, festivals broke routine, and prayers structured the day. Yet even faith did not erase hardship. It offered understanding, not comfort. Seasonal cycles dictated hope and worry. Spring offered anticipation. Summer, tension. Autumn, relief if harvest succeeded. Winter, anxiety. Life was measured not by milestones, but by weather and labor. Community could be a lifeline. Neighbors helped with planting, harvesting, and tending animals. Shared experience created trust and resilience, but it did not change the material scarcity of life. Disease moved quietly. Fevers, infections, and chronic conditions lingered, weakening bodies over time. Remedies were often ineffective. Minor illness could become major and sometimes fatal. Childhood was brief. Skills, obedience, and endurance were learned early. Play existed, but always alongside responsibility. Children were small adults in training, preparing for a lifetime of work. And beneath all of this, peasant life continued quietly, relentlessly, shaping each generation in ways invisible to the lords, the kings, or the historians who wrote about them. Even in the quietest moments, peasants were aware of limits. Every choice came with consequence, whether it was how far to carry water, how much seed to plant, or how long to rest. Freedom was measured in inches, not miles. Old tools shaped bodies as much as labor did. Wooden plows, scythes, and hammers left hands calloused and backs bent. Limbs ached constantly, yet the work could not stop. Pain was accepted as part of existence, not as a warning. Children watched and learned quickly. A misstep in carrying water or misjudging a load could result in punishment or loss. Learning was practical, often harsh, and always immediate. Education was a matter of survival, not curiosity. Isolation was both physical and mental. Villages were small, distant from towns or markets. News arrived slowly, often distorted. A peasant's world was bounded by what could be seen, heard, or touched, leaving imagination as the only escape. Competition existed quietly among neighbors. Land, tools, or livestock were limited. Rivalry could appear in subtle ways. Who harvested first, whose animals grew fastest, whose household managed better. Pride mattered, but it never outweighed survival. Women carried burdens unseen by many. Their labor began before sunrise and ended long after sunset. They cooked, cleaned, tended children, cared for the sick, and sometimes labored in the fields alongside men. Risk of childbirth added constant pressure. Strength was measured daily. Health was fragile. Infection from a small cut could become life-threatening. Malnutrition left bodies weak and vulnerable. Illness struck quietly, altering the rhythm of work and sometimes the fate of the entire household. Traveling to nearby villages or markets was dangerous. Roads were rough, animals unpredictable, and thieves or wild animals a constant threat. Even a short journey could result in injury or loss. Safety depended on vigilance, skill, and luck. Religion offered structure. Bells, rituals, and prayers marked time, providing a framework for days filled with labor. Yet religious observance was both solace and reminder of limits, obligations, and the unchangeable hierarchy that governed life. Even leisure was shaped by necessity. Music, games, or festivals were brief, scheduled, and communal. They offered relief, but rarely rest. Entertainment was never indulgent. It existed to sustain spirit enough to continue. Old age arrived slowly, yet inexorably. Strength waned, but obligations remained. Pain became background, rhythm of life, and measure of experience. Survival in later years required help from children, neighbors, or extended family. Mortality was ever present. Death could come quietly from illness, accident, or famine. Families learned early to adapt, mourn briefly, and continue. Loss was frequent, expected, and absorbed into the fabric of daily existence. Despite all hardship, humans adapted. Routine became resilience. Habit became strategy. Community, even limited, provided structure. Survival was success, and endurance was the measure of life. And there remained layers yet untouched. Pressures, risks, and unseen labor that made peasant life far harsher than any single description could capture. The smell of damp earth after rain was constant. Mud clung to boots and clothing, and every movement carried the scent into homes. Fires smoked, clay walls absorbed odors, and even the food smelled of work. Grains baked in coarse ovens, stews simmering over embers, and the faint tang of salt preserved for months. Morning chores began before most could see clearly. Water had to be drawn from wells, milk gathered from animals, fires rekindled to warm frozen homes. Each action required effort, precision, and timing. A delay, even small, could cascade into hunger or illness. Peasant families worked in concert, a quiet rhythm of survival. While one person churned butter, another repaired tools. Children ran errands, carried baskets, and mimicked adult work. Noise was constant, yet harmonious, a daily chorus of endurance. Evening brought no complete relief. Cooking, cleaning, tending animals, and mending clothing often stretched long after sunset. Lamps burned dimly, shadows flickering across walls as tired bodies moved in slow, careful motion. Illness was rarely dramatic, but its effects lingered. Fever, fatigue, or lingering infection could reduce efficiency for days or weeks. Recovery was uncertain. A body weakened by malnutrition or overwork could be permanently slowed. The village itself shaped behavior. Paths and homes were close, almost claustrophobic. Actions were observed. Rumors spread quickly. Reputation mattered, not for status, but for trust. Who could be relied upon to help during harvest? Who might shirk responsibility when trouble came? Children grew quickly. Play was limited, often mixed with responsibility. Learning to handle tools, care for animals, and manage chores became their education. Lessons in endurance, caution, and obedience were learned more by observation than instruction. Women's work was relentless. Beyond field labor, they maintained the household, prepared food, cared for the young and old, and tended to the sick. Their strength was measured daily, and mistakes were costly. Yet their labor often went unnoticed outside their family or village. Disease, hunger, and exhaustion combined quietly. They were rarely dramatic, but always cumulative. Life pressed slowly, but consistently against body, mind, and morale. The harshness of existence was built not on sudden events, but on unending repetition. Even moments of beauty were small. A warm sunrise, a ripe fruit, or a festival song could lift spirits briefly. These instances mattered precisely because they were fleeting, fragile, and rare. Work dictated every decision. Hours spent idle were hours wasted. Time was money, though most peasants never held currency. It was counted in bread baked, crops harvested, animals fed, and tasks completed before the next sunrise. Seasons imposed pressure. Spring brought hope and strain. Summer, exhaustion. Autumn, anxiety. Winter, survival. Life was cyclical, relentless, and unforgiving. Yet the rhythm itself became part of expectation, part of how people thought, moved, and endured. Even faith was intertwined with labor. Prayers were often requests for rain, for health, for protection from disease. Rituals punctuated work, but they also reminded peasants of limits, of the unseen forces they could not control. The quiet brutality of peasant life was cumulative. It was not often noticed by outsiders and rarely written about in detail. Yet it shaped generations, habits, and entire societies. Endurance, adaptability, and careful attention became more valuable than any wealth or title. And still, this world held more layers, more unseen labor, more small dangers, and more invisible pressures waiting to be described. The sound of animals filled the village from dawn until night. Chickens pecked constantly. Dogs barked at passing travelers. Cows lowed when milk was needed, and pigs stirred in pens, rooting for scraps. Every noise demanded attention, but it was also part of the rhythm of life, grounding the day in constant activity. Even water brought its own challenges. Wells were often far from homes, meaning daily trips carrying heavy buckets. Streams and rivers could be muddy or contaminated, and during dry seasons, water scarcity forced careful rationing. One mistake, one careless sip, could bring illness. Markets, when they existed, were a rare window into the world beyond the village. Merchants brought goods from towns or distant regions. Exotic spices, iron tools, or rare cloth arrived slowly, and often at high cost. Peasants could trade surplus grain or eggs, but what they gained was never abundant, and luck often determined success. The weight of authority was constant, even when unseen. Lords did not need to appear to enforce rules. Tax collectors, stewards, and local enforcers maintained control, reminding peasants that every choice had limits. Obedience was safer than resistance. Yet the smallest moments could bring relief. A shared story by the fire, a successful harvest, a brief festival song, or even a warm meal on a winter morning could brighten the relentless rhythm of life. These moments were fleeting, but deeply treasured. Illness and injury shaped households quietly. When a farmer fell sick, the entire family felt the consequences. Work was redistributed, tasks doubled, and survival relied on cooperation. Life could pivot on the health of one person. Children grew into responsibility faster than we expect. Learning to plow, carry water, or milk animals was not optional. Mistakes could have immediate consequences. Childhood was compressed, and independence came in small, incremental steps. Food was never taken for granted. Every meal required effort, gathering, cooking, preserving. Grain had to be milled, vegetables washed and stored, meat salted or smoked. A single mistake could result in waste that could not be replaced for months. Winter nights were long and cold. Fires burned low. Families huddled for warmth. The wind rattled roof beams and froze exposed skin. Sleep came in fits, interrupted by the needs of animals or children, or the biting cold that could not be fully blocked. Religion was a framework for understanding. Bells marked hours, festivals offered rhythm, and prayers structured the day. Faith was practical as much as spiritual. It promised guidance, protection, and sometimes the hope of relief from hardship. Even minor injuries were threats. A cut, a burn, or a sprain could incapacitate someone, slowing the household's work. Without proper treatment, what might be minor today could become life-altering tomorrow. The brutality of life was often invisible to those outside. Lords, nobles, and chroniclers rarely wrote of daily toil. They wrote of battles, laws, and conquests. Peasants endured quietly, shaping society without recognition. Their labor foundational, but unrecorded. And beneath all this, there remained quiet layers, emotional strain, subtle inequalities, small injustices, and daily pressures, shaping medieval life in ways that were not immediately visible, but always felt. Imagine the morning mist clinging to the fields. Dew weighs down the grass, making every step heavier. A peasant steps carefully, carrying a basket of vegetables to the market or a bucket of milk to the manor. Even small actions require attention. Carelessness could mean injury, spilled food, or lost time. The rhythms of the village are punctuated by routine. A bell may toll for morning prayers, or a rooster may crow, signaling the start of work. These cues guide every motion, every task, and every pause. Life is measured in work completed rather than hours or dates. Work itself is unrelenting. Plowing, sowing, weeding, harvesting. Each task cycles endlessly with the seasons. A break is rare, and rest is often short. Bodies ache constantly, but labor cannot stop. Fatigue is accepted as normal, embedded into daily existence. Even the youngest members of the household participate. Children carry water, feed animals, and learn practical skills through observation and repetition. Play exists, but it is woven into work, not separate from it. Every movement serves survival. Nutrition is fragile. Meals are modest and repetitive, mostly grains, vegetables, and occasional meat or fish. Hunger is always possible, and every morsel is precious. Preservation methods are crude, and spoilage is a constant threat. Illness shadows every household. Fever, infection, or digestive problems can quickly spread. Medical knowledge is limited, and remedies are often ineffective. Families adjust routines quietly to accommodate the sick, but survival depends on endurance, not medicine. Women bear unique burdens. In addition to field work, they maintain the home, care for children, tend animals, and manage food preparation. Pregnancy and childbirth add risk, yet there is no pause in daily responsibility. Strength and skill are measured every hour. Even the home offers little comfort. Structures are small, often a single room, with smoke curling through thatched roofs. Floors are dirt, walls are thin, and warmth is minimal. Privacy does not exist. People sleep close together, often with animals, and rest is shallow and interrupted. Seasonal changes dictate life. Spring offers hope, summer brings toil, autumn pressures, and winter demands survival. Each shift is subtle but relentless, shaping expectations, moods, and the pace of work. Social hierarchy is visible everywhere. Castles and manors remind peasants of their place. Orders are delivered quietly through stewards or tax collectors, but obedience is enforced through habit and pressure rather than confrontation. Even leisure is practical. Festivals, storytelling, or music provide relief, but never excess. Entertainment is brief and functional, giving strength to continue rather than indulgence. Moments of joy are small, cherished, and fleeting. Old age is gradual but demanding. Bodies weaken, yet obligations remain. Pain, fatigue, and the weight of experience become companions. Survival depends on children or neighbors, on routines established over decades. Mortality is constant. Death may arrive quietly through illness or accident. Families absorb loss quickly, adapt, and continue. Life is measured not in years, but in the ability to endure. The quiet brutality of peasant life is cumulative. No single event defines it. It is built from daily effort, slow deprivation, constant responsibility, and limited choice. Yet people endure, adapt, and survive, shaping generations in ways invisible to outsiders. And even now, beneath these obvious pressures, other subtle burdens linger, unseen, unspoken, but shaping life in ways equally profound. Dawn often comes before rest has fully left the body. The air is cold and damp, and the first steps out of the home are already a test of endurance. Feet sink into mud, water drips from roofs, and the smell of smoke lingers from last night's fire. Every day begins with this quiet struggle. The fields themselves are relentless teachers. Weeds grow as fast as crops, pests consume what is planted, and soil must be tended constantly. Labor is measured in repetitive motion, bending, lifting, striking, until muscles ache, backs stiffen, and fingers blister. There is no pause. Nature ignores human fatigue. Animals demand attention every day. Goats, cows, pigs, and chickens each have their own schedules. A missed feeding can mean death, lost milk, or fewer eggs. Life and survival are intertwined with the smallest actions. Neglect is never an option. Water is more precious than most realize. Wells can dry, streams can be muddy, and rainwater is unreliable. Carrying water requires strength, but also careful balance. One spill can delay meals, cooking, or cleaning. Every drop is valuable, and every step counts. Even small injuries carry weight. A sprained ankle, a cut hand, or a burn from cooking may slow work for days. Without medical knowledge or proper remedies, what seems minor can escalate into a serious threat. A household's survival depends on everyone functioning. Children grow quickly under these conditions. By age 7 or 8, they already participate fully in labor. Childhood games exist, but often double as lessons in skill, caution, and endurance. The line between work and learning is nearly invisible. Women's lives are constant motion. Alongside fieldwork, they manage the home, prepare food, care for children, and tend the sick. Pregnancy adds risk, yet life continues with barely a pause. Strength is measured in resilience, skill, and the ability to keep going despite pain or fatigue. Nutrition is simple, but never guaranteed. Bread, porridge, vegetables, and occasionally meat are the staples. Food is carefully rationed, preserved, and stored. But pests, spoilage, and poor harvests are always threats. Hunger is a slow pressure, felt in bones more than voiced. Social structure constrains every choice. Peasants owe labor, rent, and obedience. Lords' demands shape life silently, and compliance is survival. Rebellion exists, but it is dangerous and often temporary. Power belongs elsewhere. The peasant's world is one of adaptation and endurance. Festivals and holy days are bright moments in an otherwise constrained life. Music, dance, and communal meals temporarily break the rhythm of labor. They are treasured precisely because they are brief, rare, and fleeting. Homes are small and crowded. One room often houses an entire family, and sometimes animals. Privacy is non-existent. Sleep is shallow, frequently interrupted by the cold, noise, or the needs of others. Comfort is minimal, but endurance is constant. Even minor illnesses carry long consequences. A fever or infection can slow work, affect harvests, and ripple through the household. Remedies are limited, and recovery depends as much on luck as care. Survival is a careful balance of attention, skill, and timing. Life is shaped less by dramatic moments and more by quiet repetition. Every season, every day, every task is a small test. Fatigue, hunger, risk, and obligation are constant companions. Yet adaptation becomes skill, endurance becomes habit, and survival becomes the measure of success. And beneath this surface, unseen pressures continue to shape daily life. Small injustices, inequalities, and limits that are rarely recorded, but always felt. Mourning often brings more than work. It brings uncertainty. A frost may have damaged the crops overnight. A sudden storm may have flooded the lower fields, or an animal may be missing. Each morning, peasants assess the unseen consequences of what happened while they slept. The body is both tool and liability. Blisters, stiff muscles, and aching joints are constant companions. Every motion is measured against strength and stamina. Even minor fatigue slows progress and adds risk. Survival depends on knowing your limits, and often exceeding them. Meals are small, functional, and carefully preserved. Grains are baked into bread, porridge is thick and plain, and meat is rare or salted for long storage. Hunger is never absent, only postponed. Every bite counts, every morsel rationed. Illness spreads quietly. A sick child or neighbor can impact the entire village. Remedies are a mixture of herbs, superstition, and prayer. Knowledge is limited, and prevention is as important as treatment. A household must adapt instantly to even mild sickness. Women's labor shapes every part of life. They carry water, cook, clean, tend the sick, and care for children, all while maintaining their own energy for physical work in the fields. Pain and exhaustion are constants, yet efficiency must be maintained. Children grow up observing endurance as a model. Play and learning are intertwined with survival. They mimic adult tasks, sometimes performing them fully. Mistakes are expensive, and lessons learned early are necessary for life. Winter nights are long, dark, and cold. Fires provide warmth, but wood is limited. Homes are small, shared spaces, and noise travels easily. Sleep is short, shallow, and interrupted. Cold settles into the bones and lingers until spring. The presence of authority is subtle but constant. Lords and stewards enforce rules indirectly, through tax collectors, fines, or labor demands. Compliance is safer than rebellion. Obedience becomes habit, and questioning is dangerous. Travel beyond the village is rare and risky. Roads are rough, weather unpredictable, and wild animals or thieves are constant threats. Markets may provide goods or news, but the journey itself is dangerous. Every movement outside familiar spaces carries risk. Small victories bring relief. A successful harvest, a repaired tool, a healthy child, or a clear day brings hope and temporary reprieve. These moments sustain morale, even if they do not alter overall hardship. The mental weight of repeated labor and uncertainty shapes daily thought. Decisions are measured by survival, risk, and necessity. Imagination exists, but it is quiet, folded into small dreams of easier days. Even when disease, hunger, or injury strikes, communities adapt. Neighbors share food, assist with work, and provide guidance. Cooperation becomes a survival skill, not just a social nicety. The brutality of life is often invisible to outsiders. Chroniclers and nobles record battles and taxes, but not the daily endurance of peasants. Yet their labor, persistence, and resilience underpin every layer of medieval society. And beneath all visible hardship, there are still subtle pressures, emotional strain, rigid social expectations, and unseen labor shaping lives with quiet but relentless force. Imagine stepping outside just as the sun barely rises. The frost crunches underfoot, and your breath forms small clouds in the cold air. Every step feels deliberate. The ground is uneven, and the weight of a bucket of water or a basket of vegetables makes balance essential. One misstep could cost hours of labor, or even a day's work if injury occurs. The animals never pause. Chickens scatter at the slightest movement. Goats bleat for attention, and cows press against pens for feeding. Each requires tending at the right time, or the day's rhythm is disrupted. Their needs are constant, and mistakes are unforgiving. Inside the home, work continues. Smoke from the fire curls through the thatched roof, clinging to walls and ceilings. Food must be prepared for the day, tools repaired, clothing mended. Every action has purpose, every movement counted. Comfort is minimal, efficiency is survival. Hunger is quiet, but persistent. Meals are simple: bread, porridge, and perhaps some vegetables from the garden. Meat is rare, often salted or preserved. Spoilage, pests, or poor harvests can reduce food stores silently. leaving families rationing until relief arrives. If it does, injury and illness alter the household immediately. A sprained ankle or fever slows work for days. With no professional care, minor ailments can become dangerous. A family must shift responsibilities quickly, redistributing labor to survive. Children grow up quickly in this environment. They carry water, feed animals, and assist with fieldwork. Their play is short, interwoven with lessons in endurance, caution, and responsibility. Mistakes are costly, and learning is immediate. Women carry burdens nearly invisible to outsiders. Alongside field labor, they manage cooking, cleaning, childcare, and care for the sick. Pregnancy adds risk, yet life continues relentlessly. Strength and resilience are required for every hour. Even small tasks demand attention. A single loaf of bread must be baked correctly, grain must be milled, and food must be stored safely. Neglect means waste, and waste can ripple into hunger or missed work. The seasons dictate more than planting and harvest. Spring brings hope and anxiety. Summer brings toil and heat. Autumn brings urgency and tension. Winter brings survival and reflection. Life follows cycles, and deviation can be costly. Faith offers guidance and reassurance. Bells mark the day, festivals punctuate the year, and prayers provide structure. Yet, even belief cannot remove hunger, cold, or exhaustion. It offers order in a world that demands constant work. Noise and smell are constant companions. The clatter of tools, the lowing of animals, the crackle of fires, and the tang of smoke and dampness fill the senses. Silence is rare, and quiet often signals something amiss. Even moments of rest are brief. The night brings limited warmth, shallow sleep, and frequent interruptions. Pain, cold, or animal care intrude on even these few hours. Yet morning comes again, demanding action, attention, and endurance. The brutality of peasant life is cumulative, subtle, and ever-present. It is not one dramatic event, but decades of small pressures, repeated endlessly. Life is defined by labor, adaptation, and survival, with resilience as the most valuable skill. And still, beneath these obvious hardships, more unseen pressures remain. Emotional, social, and practical forces that quietly shape every aspect of life in a medieval village. Dawn can be deceptive. The sky may glow with promise, yet the frost clinging to the soil threatens the earliest crops. Peasants step carefully, gauging weight, ground, and balance. Every task is a calculation, every movement measured against risk and reward. The village is alive with quiet urgency. Chickens scratch impatiently, dogs bark at distant travelers, and cows low with expectation. Each sound demands attention, a reminder that survival is never passive. Even for a moment's distraction, consequences can follow. Fields stretch for miles, yet every inch must be cared for. Weeds grow faster than crops, and pests attack silently. The soil, no matter how well tended, resists control. Labor is a conversation with nature, one that humans rarely win outright. At home, the work continues without pause. Fires need tending, meals must be prepared, clothing repaired. Every action has purpose, and comfort is secondary. Even small mistakes, a burnt meal, spilled water, a cracked tool, ripple outward, creating extra work and risk. Hunger is subtle but persistent. Bread and porridge form the staples, while vegetables and preserved meat supplement meals. Storage is fragile. Spoilage or pests can erase weeks of careful work. Hunger shapes thought, decision, and mood. Illness is never dramatic, yet ever present. Fevers, infections, and chronic conditions weaken bodies quietly. Remedies are limited, often ineffective, and knowledge of causes is sparse. Recovery depends on attention, luck, and endurance. Women carry burdens invisible to outsiders. They balance field labor with household duties, childcare, and care for the sick. Pregnancy and childbirth add risk, yet obligations never pause. Strength and skill are measured daily, silently, and without recognition. Children learn responsibility early. Play is intertwined with labor. Missteps carry consequences immediately. Survival lessons are practical, harsh, and unrelenting. Childhood is compressed into work, learning, and endurance. Even small comforts are rare. A warm fire, a bright day, a brief song, or a small feast during a festival can lift spirits. These moments are fleeting but powerful, offering glimpses of relief in an otherwise relentless life. Social hierarchy is everywhere, though often invisible. Lords and stewards control land, labor, and obligations. Authority need not be seen to be felt. Compliance is safer than rebellion, and habits of obedience are ingrained over a lifetime. Travel beyond the village is dangerous. Roads are rough and exposed to the elements. Thieves, wild animals, and accidents are constant threats. Market trips offer goods or news, but they carry risk. Every step outside familiar paths requires attention and skill. Night brings brief pause, but little comfort. Fires burn low, warmth is scarce, and noise travels easily through thin walls. Sleep is light and often interrupted by the cold, the animals, or the demands of others. Even in rest, vigilance remains necessary. Endurance shapes thought. Decision-making is always measured against survival. Imagination exists, but is cautious, folded into small hopes. A good harvest, a safe winter, a healthy child. Life is endurance in practice, not in abstraction. And beneath these visible struggles, other forces quietly shape life. Subtle inequalities, social pressures, and daily constraints that press gently but persistently on mind, body, and spirit. A frost-laden morning begins slowly, the sky pale with the first light. Every step in the field feels heavier than the last. The mud clings to boots, the cold bites at hands, and even carrying a basket of vegetables becomes a test of endurance. The day starts with calculation, not leisure. Animals demand attention as soon as they awaken. Chickens scatter for food, cows need milking, and goats bleat for care. Even the smallest oversight, missing a feeding, spilling water, can ripple into consequences that last hours or days. Life is a chain of responsibilities, each link dependent on the last. The smell of smoke, earth, and animals fills the air. Fires burning for warmth or cooking smoke the small huts, mixing with the damp scent of mud floors. These smells are constant, marking time as much as bells or the sun. Comfort is never complete, but adaptation becomes instinct. Meals are modest and functional. Porridge, bread, occasional vegetables, and salted meat sustain, but never satisfy. Food scarcity is always possible. Storage is precarious, pests are persistent, and spoilage threatens survival quietly, without ceremony. Illness creeps in silently. Fever, infection, and digestive complaints weaken the body slowly. Remedies are rudimentary: herbs, superstition, or prayer. Recovery relies on endurance, careful attention, and luck. Even minor sickness can compromise the work of an entire household. Children learn quickly. By age 6 or 7, they are already observers and participants in adult tasks. Carrying water, tending animals, helping in fields. These are lessons in responsibility and survival. Play exists, but it is brief and integrated into labor. Mistakes are instructive, often harshly so. Women carry layers of responsibility invisible to many. Fieldwork, household maintenance, childcare, and care for the sick all fall on them. Pregnancy adds risk, yet life continues relentlessly. Strength and endurance are tested hourly, rarely rewarded, and often unnoticed. Seasons dominate experience. Spring brings planting, anxiety, and hope. Summer brings heat, toil, and constant attention. Autumn is harvest, tension, and worry. Winter is survival, reflection, and quiet strain. Life is cyclical, but never easy. Noise is constant. Tools striking wood, animals moving, fires crackling, voices calling. Silence is rare and often signals trouble. Even rest is punctuated by the environment, the cold, the animals, or distant weather. Sleep is shallow, brief, and precious. Even fleeting comforts are deeply felt. A warm meal, a brief festival, a bright sunrise, or a song around the fire provides relief. These moments sustain the spirit, even if they cannot alter the relentless rhythm of work and survival. Social hierarchy shapes every decision. Lords, stewards, and local authority impose obligations that define life. Compliance is safer than resistance. Independence is rare. Habits of obedience are ingrained over time, shaping thought and behavior. Travel beyond the village is fraught with danger. Rough roads, wild animals, thieves, and exposure to the elements make even brief journeys risky. Markets provide goods, news, or contact, but the journey itself is a test of vigilance, skill, and luck. Endurance defines thought. Imagination exists, but is tempered by reality. Daily choices revolve around survival. Which tasks to prioritize, which risks to take, which small pleasures to embrace. Life is defined less by opportunity than by adaptation. And beneath these visible challenges, more subtle pressures endure. Emotional strain, social expectation, and quiet labor that shapes not just bodies, but minds, perspectives, and entire generations. Morning air is crisp, and the first light casts long shadows across the fields. Peasants rise before the sun, moving carefully across frozen ground. Every task is calculated. Carrying water, tending animals, or gathering tools. Even small mistakes can ripple outward, making the day harder than it already is. Animals demand attention constantly. Chickens cluck and scratch. Goats bleat insistently. Cows press for milking. Neglecting their needs isn't an option. Life depends on the rhythm of care. Every morning begins with this quiet negotiation of survival. The smell of smoke and earth fills the home. Fires provide warmth and cooking, but also a lingering tang in every corner. Floors are dirt, walls thin, and space crowded. Comfort is minimal, yet humans adapt, finding rhythm in repetition. Food is never abundant. Bread, porridge, vegetables, and occasional meat sustain, but never satisfy. Preservation is crude, spoilage common, and pests relentless. Hunger is always a pressure in the background, quiet but persistent. Illness is a constant threat. Fevers, infections, and digestive troubles weaken bodies quietly. Remedies are rudimentary. Herbs, superstition, prayer. Minor ailments can escalate if ignored, and households adjust immediately to accommodate the sick. Survival is collective. Children learn responsibility early. By the age of 7, they already carry water, feed animals, and assist in the fields. Play exists, but always alongside duty. Mistakes have consequences, and lessons are learned quickly. Childhood is compressed, a constant preparation for adult labor. Women bear immense burdens. Alongside fieldwork, they manage households, care for children, tend the sick, and prepare food. Pregnancy and childbirth add risk. Strength, endurance, and skill are required every hour, yet recognition is rare. Seasons shape life relentlessly. Spring offers hope and anxiety. Summer brings heat, toil, and exhaustion. Autumn demands the urgency of harvest. Winter tests survival. Each cycle repeats, leaving little room for deviation. Noise surrounds daily life. Tools clattering, animals moving, fires crackling, voices calling. Silence is rare. Even rest is punctuated by environment, the cold, animals, or distant weather. Sleep is shallow, broken, yet essential. Even small pleasures carry significance. A warm fire, a bright sunrise, a shared song, or a festival meal provides relief. These moments are brief, yet treasured, sustaining the spirit amid relentless labor. Social hierarchy governs all. Lords, stewards, and local authorities impose obligations quietly, but firmly. Obedience is safer than resistance, and habits of submission are instilled early. Independence is rare, freedom constrained by unseen rules. Travel is dangerous. Roads are rough, animals unpredictable, thieves a threat. Markets bring goods and news, but each journey carries risk. Peasants weigh every step carefully, balancing need against potential danger. Life is defined by endurance. Imagination exists, but is tempered by reality. Every action, every choice, every small pleasure is measured against survival. Daily life is a negotiation between desire, risk, and necessity. And beneath all this, subtle pressures persist: emotional strain, social expectation, unseen labor, quietly shaping thoughts, behavior, and generations over decades. Morning light filters through thatched roofs, weak but persistent. The cold bites immediately, stiffening joints and chilling fingers. Every movement, lifting water, carrying grain, tending animals, demands focus and care. One slip, one dropped item, can make the day longer, harder, or even dangerous. Animals are relentless in their demands. Chickens squabble for feed, cows low impatiently, and goats pull at fences. Each requires attention in precise timing, or productivity suffers. The household's rhythm is measured against the rhythm of living creatures. The scent of smoke, damp earth, and animals clings to clothes and walls. Even indoors, air carries reminders of labor. Fires heat small rooms, but leave residue in every corner. Dirt floors and thin walls allow little separation from the ongoing world outside. Meals are small, but necessary. Bread, porridge, vegetables, and sometimes salted meat sustain but rarely satisfy. Preservation is a challenge. Grain can spoil, vegetables rot, meat attracts pests. Hunger is never absent, only postponed. Every morsel is precious. Illness strikes quietly, but persistently. A fever or infection can slow work for days. Remedies are rudimentary. Herbs, prayers, superstition. Minor ailments may escalate if unattended, affecting the household's ability to survive. Children grow into responsibility early. By age 6 or 7, they carry water, tend animals, and assist in fields. Play exists, but is brief and functional. Mistakes have consequences, and lessons are absorbed immediately. Childhood is practical training, preparation for adult survival. Women's work is unceasing. Alongside field labor, they manage the household, care for children, prepare food, and tend the sick. Pregnancy and childbirth add risk, yet daily obligations never pause. Their strength is measured not by recognition, but by continuity. Seasons dictate life's tempo. Spring brings planting, hope, and worry. Summer is toil, heat, and constant attention. Autumn demands harvest, storage, and urgent care. Winter tests endurance, patience, and resourcefulness. Each year repeats the same pressures, shaping expectation and habit. Noise is constant. Tools strike wood, animals move restlessly, fires crackle, voices call. Silence is rare, and often signals something amiss. Even rest is interrupted by the demands of living beings and environment. Sleep is shallow, broken, and precious. Even brief moments of relief matter greatly. A bright sunrise, a shared meal, a song, or a festival provides psychological sustenance. These fleeting joys allow the spirit to endure the relentless demands of survival. Social hierarchy shapes every choice. Authority is never distant. Lords, stewards, and tax collectors impose rules that limit freedom. Compliance ensures survival, while rebellion risks devastation. Habits of obedience are ingrained over a lifetime. Travel outside the village is perilous. Roads are rough, weather unpredictable, and wild animals or thieves are ever-present threats. Markets bring goods and news, but the journey itself is a constant risk. Every step is calculated. The mind learns endurance. Every action, choice, and tiny pleasure is weighed against survival. Imagination exists, but is subdued by practicality. Life is less about aspiration than about sustaining body, family, and spirit. Even with visible hardships, subtler pressures endure. Emotional strain, social expectation, invisible labor, all quietly shape lives, thoughts, and communities. Generations grow under these pressures, learning resilience and caution before independence is ever possible. Morning fog hangs low over the fields, hiding uneven ground and puddles of melted frost. Each step requires care, whether carrying water, grain, or firewood. Even small miscalculations can lead to spilled resources or twisted ankles. Life begins with attention, not leisure. Animals create a constant rhythm. Chickens scratch and cluck, pigs snuffle and root, cows wait impatiently for milking. Their needs shape every decision. Ignoring them is not an option. Survival depends on careful observation and timing. The air smells of damp earth, smoke, and animals. Fires heat homes, but leave lingering tangs. Floors are packed dirt, walls thin, and rooms small. Privacy is almost non-existent. Comfort is a luxury few experience, yet rhythm and habit create adaptation. Food is modest, functional, and rationed. Bread, porridge, vegetables, salted meat, meals sustain, never indulge. Storage is precarious, pests persistent, and spoilage a constant threat. Hunger is quiet, but persistent, pressing in bones and minds alike. Illness arrives subtly. Fever, digestive problems, or minor wounds can slow labor for days. Remedies are primitive. Herbs, superstition, prayer. Recovery relies on endurance, care, and luck. One sick household member can shift responsibility across the entire family. Children grow quickly under these pressures. By 6 or 7, they carry water, feed animals, and assist in fields. Play exists, but often doubles as skill training. Mistakes are instructive, learned immediately, and sometimes harshly. Childhood is compressed, practical, and unrelenting. Women's labor is ceaseless and invisible to many outsiders. Alongside fieldwork, they maintain the home, care for children, and tend the sick. Pregnancy and childbirth add risk, yet duties continue without pause. Strength and resilience are tested continuously. Seasons dictate action. Spring brings planting and hope. Summer, exhaustion and toil. Autumn, harvest and urgency. Winter, survival and reflection. Life follows these rhythms with little room for deviation. Each year is predictable yet unforgiving. Noise is ever present. Tools strike, animals stir, fires crackle, voices call. Silence is rare and often alarming. Even sleep is interrupted by animals, cold, or chores. Rest is shallow, brief, and precious. Even fleeting comforts are profound. A warm meal, a bright sunrise, a festival, or a shared song provides temporary reprieve. These moments sustain the spirit and remind peasants that life has small joys, however rare. Social hierarchy frames every choice. Lords, stewards, and collectors enforce rules. Compliance ensures survival. Resistance invites punishment. Independence is rare, and habits of obedience are ingrained across generations. Travel beyond the village is perilous. Roads are rough, weather unpredictable, and wild animals or thieves threaten every step. Markets bring goods, news, and connection, but the journey itself demands skill, attention, and luck. Endurance becomes mental as much as physical. Every action and choice is measured against survival. Imagination and hope exist, but are tempered by reality. Life is defined by resilience and adaptation rather than opportunity or freedom. Beneath visible hardships, subtler pressures shape life. Emotional strain, social expectation, and unseen labor quietly influence thoughts, decisions, and entire communities. Survival is not only physical, but mental and social, honed through decades of repetition. The first light of day barely warms the air. Frost lingers in corners, and the ground is slick with moisture. Every step is careful, deliberate. Buckets of water, baskets of grain, or bundles of firewood must be carried precisely. One slip can set the day back hours. Animals demand constant attention. Chickens scatter for feed, pigs root in pens, cows wait impatiently for milking. Their behavior shapes the day's rhythm. Neglecting even one can ripple through the household, creating extra work and stress. The smell of smoke, damp earth, and livestock clings to homes. Fires burn low but steady, providing warmth and cooking fuel. Floors are dirt, walls thin, and spaces small. Comfort is limited, but humans adapt. Repetition becomes rhythm, rhythm becomes habit, and habit sustains life. Meals are modest but essential. Bread, porridge, vegetables, and salted meat sustain the body but rarely satisfy the appetite. Storage is fragile. Spoilage, pests, and weather threaten the supply. Hunger is a slow, constant pressure, shaping decisions and tempering energy. Illness is an ever-present shadow. Fever, infection, and minor wounds weaken the body quietly. Remedies are simple: herbs, superstition, prayer. Recovery relies on vigilance and luck. Even minor sickness can disrupt work, slow harvests, and strain the household. Children assume responsibility quickly. By age 6 or 7, they carry water, tend animals, and assist in the fields. Play exists, but is brief and functional. Mistakes teach harsh lessons. Childhood is compressed into practical survival skills rather than carefree learning. Women bear invisible burdens. Fieldwork, household labor, childcare, and care for the sick fall largely on their shoulders. Pregnancy and childbirth add constant risk, yet obligations continue without pause. Strength is measured in endurance and daily productivity, rarely recognized beyond the family. Seasons shape every choice. Spring brings planting, hope, and anxiety. Summer brings heat, toil, and vigilance. Autumn demands harvest, preservation, and urgent labor. Winter tests endurance, warmth, and resourcefulness. Life follows cycles, predictable yet unrelenting. Noise fills the village. Tools strike, animals stir, fires crackle, voices call. Silence is rare and often signals trouble. Even rest is interrupted by chores, cold, or animals. Sleep is shallow, light, and fleeting. Even small moments of relief carry significance. A warm fire, a sunrise, a festival, or a shared song brings temporary respite. These moments sustain spirit, reminding villagers that life contains fleeting joys, however brief. Social hierarchy governs daily decisions. Lords, stewards, and tax collectors impose rules. Obedience ensures survival. Defiance risks punishment. Independence is rare, and compliance becomes habitual. Life is constrained, guided by unseen authority. Travel outside the village is dangerous. Roads are rough, weather unpredictable, and threats, thieves, wild animals, accidents, are ever present. Markets bring news, goods, and opportunity, but every journey demands skill, attention, and courage. Endurance defines thought and action. Every decision, every movement, every small pleasure is weighed against survival. Imagination exists, but is tempered by reality. Life is defined by adaptation, resilience, and careful judgment. Beneath visible hardship, subtle pressures persist. Emotional strain, social expectation, and unseen labor quietly influence thought, behavior, and community dynamics. Survival depends on mind, body, and social cohesion alike. Morning light barely warms the village. Frost clings to pathways and fields, making every step deliberate. Carrying buckets of water or baskets of grain feels heavier than the weight alone. Cold, fatigue, and caution combine into a daily trial before work even truly begins. Animals set the pace of life. Chickens scratch and cluck impatiently. Pigs root for scraps. Cows push for milking. Each requires attention at precise times. A single missed task can ripple through the day, increasing toil, stress, and risk. The smell of smoke, damp earth, and livestock permeates homes. Fires burn steadily, providing warmth and cooking heat, yet the lingering scent clings to skin, hair, and clothing. Floors are dirt, walls thin, and rooms small. Comfort is minimal, but rhythm and habit help sustain life. Food is modest, functional, and often rationed. Bread, porridge, vegetables, and salted or smoked meat sustain, but rarely satisfy. Preservation is precarious. Pests, spoilage, or poor harvests threaten survival quietly. Hunger is subtle, constant, and shaping every decision. Illness is ever present. Fevers, digestive ailments, and small injuries weaken bodies slowly. Remedies are limited. Herbs, superstition, prayer. Recovery relies on endurance, care, and luck. Even minor sickness shifts labor and responsibilities across the household. Children assume responsibility early. By 6 or 7, they carry water, feed animals, and assist in the fields. Play exists, but always with a practical purpose. Mistakes are instructive, often painful, and survival lessons are learned immediately. Women bear ceaseless responsibility. Fieldwork, home maintenance, childcare, and care for the sick fall largely on them. Pregnancy and childbirth add constant risk, yet obligations continue without pause. Strength and skill are measured daily, unrecognized beyond the family. Seasons dominate life. Spring brings planting, hope, and anxiety. Summer brings toil, heat, and exhaustion. Autumn demands harvest and preservation. Winter tests endurance, warmth, and resourcefulness. Life follows these cycles, predictable yet unforgiving. Noise fills the village. Tools strike wood. Animals stir. Fires crackle. Voices call. Silence is rare and often signals danger. Sleep is shallow and interrupted, yet essential. Even rest carries vigilance. Even fleeting moments of relief matter profoundly. A warm fire, a shared meal, a festival, or a bright sunrise brings temporary respite. These brief joys sustain the spirit, reminding peasants that life contains small pleasures amidst relentless labor. Social hierarchy governs every choice. Lords, stewards, and tax collectors enforce rules subtly but firmly. Compliance ensures survival. Rebellion invites danger. Independence is rare. Obedience becomes habitual, shaping thoughts, behavior, and daily life. Travel beyond the village is dangerous. Roads are rough, weather unpredictable, and threats, thieves, wild animals, accidents, loom constantly. Markets offer goods, news, and social contact, but the journey itself requires vigilance, skill, and luck. Endurance defines every thought and action. Daily choices, movements, and pleasures are measured against survival. Imagination exists, but is restrained by necessity. Life is shaped by adaptation, resilience, and careful attention to both body and mind. Beneath visible hardships lie subtler pressures: emotional strain, social expectation, invisible labor, and quiet inequalities. Generations are molded through repetition, endurance, and survival, rather than comfort or recognition. Dawn arrives slowly over the village, bringing muted light and biting cold. Frost clings to fields, footprints, and rooftops. Every step is careful. Buckets of water, baskets of grain, and bundles of firewood test strength and balance. The day begins with effort before any work is truly done. Animals demand attention as soon as eyes open. Chickens scatter for feed. Pigs root restlessly. Cows press impatiently for milking. Their rhythm shapes the household. Neglect is never an option. The pace of life is dictated by living creatures as much as by the sun. The smell of smoke, earth, and animals hangs in the air. Fires burn steadily, providing warmth and heat for cooking, but leave residue in every corner. Floors are dirt, walls thin, rooms small. Comfort is limited, but humans adapt through repetition and habit. Food is functional, modest, and rationed. Bread, porridge, vegetables, and salted or smoked meat sustain the body but rarely satisfy appetite. Preservation is precarious. Spoilage, pests, or poor harvests threaten survival silently. Hunger is persistent, pressing on both body and mind. Illness lingers as an ever-present threat. Fevers, digestive issues, minor wounds weaken bodies slowly. Remedies are simple: herbs, superstition, and prayer. Recovery depends on vigilance, care, and luck. Even a mild illness can disrupt work, stretch resources, and increase stress for the whole household. Children learn responsibility early. By age 6 or 7, they carry water, feed animals, and assist with fieldwork. Play exists, but often doubles as skill building. Mistakes are costly, and survival lessons are immediate and unforgiving. Childhood is compressed into practicality and endurance. Women's labor is relentless and largely invisible. Fieldwork, household chores, childcare, and care for the sick consume daily energy. Pregnancy and childbirth increase risk, yet obligations never pause. Strength, skill, and endurance are tested constantly, rarely acknowledged outside the home. Seasons dominate life. Spring brings planting, hope, and anxiety. Summer brings toil, heat, and vigilance. Autumn demands harvest, storage, and urgent labor. Winter tests endurance, warmth, and patience. Life is cyclical, predictable, yet unforgiving. Noise is constant. Tools strike wood, animals stir, fires crackle, voices call. Silence is rare and often signals danger. Even rest is shallow, broken, and precious. Sleep is temporary, never fully restorative, but vital for endurance. Even small comforts carry great weight. A warm fire, a shared meal, a festival, or a sunrise offers fleeting relief. These moments sustain the spirit, reminding peasants of joy in a life dominated by labor. Social hierarchy frames every decision. Lords, stewards, and tax collectors impose rules that shape daily life. Obedience ensures survival. Defiance invites punishment. Independence is rare. habits of compliance are instilled over a lifetime. Travel is dangerous. Roads are rough, weather unpredictable, and threats, thieves, wild animals, accidents, are constant. Markets provide goods and information, but every journey is a test of vigilance, skill, and endurance. Endurance governs thought. Every decision, action, and fleeting pleasure is weighed against survival. Imagination exists, but is tempered by necessity. Life is defined by resilience, adaptation, and careful observation of both people and environment. Beneath visible hardships, subtler pressures persist. Emotional strain, social expectation, and unseen labor quietly shape thought, behavior, and the rhythm of the village. Generations are forged through endurance, survival, and repetition rather than ease or comfort. The day begins with the smell of damp earth and smoke, even before the first tasks are attended to. Frost clings to the fields, making footing treacherous. Carrying buckets of water or heavy baskets demands precision. One slip can cost time, energy, or even lead to injury. The day tests the body before work has truly begun. Animals set the pace of daily life. Chickens scatter for feed, pigs root impatiently, cows push against pens. Their needs are immediate and unrelenting. Missing a feeding or spilling water disrupts the household, forcing adjustments that ripple through every task. The air in homes is thick with smoke and the tang of livestock. Fires provide warmth and cooking heat, but the lingering smell clings to skin, hair, and clothing. Floors are dirt, walls thin, and rooms small. Comfort is minimal, yet humans adapt, finding rhythm in repetition. Food is functional and modest. Bread, porridge, vegetables, and salted meat sustain, but rarely satisfy. Preservation is fragile. Spoilage, pests, and poor harvests threaten survival silently. Hunger presses constantly, shaping decisions, thought, and mood. Illness is an ever-present threat. Fevers, digestive problems, or minor injuries weaken the body slowly. Remedies are rudimentary. Herbs, superstition, prayer. Recovery depends on care, attention, and luck. Even minor sickness can slow work, strain resources, and shift responsibilities across the household. Children assume adult responsibilities early. By age 6 or 7, they carry water, feed animals, and assist in fields. Play exists, but often doubles as training for survival. Mistakes are instructive and immediate. Childhood is compressed into endurance, skill, and constant learning. Women carry immense burdens. Field labor, household chores, childcare, and tending the sick are continuous. Pregnancy and childbirth increase risk, yet obligations never pause. Strength, skill, and endurance are tested daily, rarely acknowledged beyond the family. Seasons dictate life's rhythm. Spring brings planting, hope, and anxiety. Summer brings heat, toil, and exhaustion. Autumn demands harvest, preservation, and vigilance. Winter tests endurance, warmth, and patience. Life follows cycles that are predictable yet merciless. Noise is ever present. Tools strike wood, animals stir, fires crackle, voices call. Silence is rare and often alarming. Even rest is shallow, interrupted by the cold, chores, or animals. Sleep is fleeting, light, and highly valued. Even brief comforts hold weight. A warm fire, a shared meal, a festival, or a sunrise offers temporary reprieve. These fleeting moments sustain the spirit, reminding peasants that joy can exist even amid relentless labor. Social hierarchy shapes every choice. Lords, stewards, and tax collectors enforce rules subtly but firmly. Obedience ensures survival, while rebellion invites punishment. Independence is rare. Compliance becomes habitual, guiding thought and behavior over a lifetime. Travel beyond the village is risky. Roads are rough, weather unpredictable, and dangers, thieves, wild animals, accidents, are constant. Markets bring goods and information, but each journey is a careful calculation of risk and reward. Endurance dominates life. Every decision, every action, and every fleeting pleasure is measured against survival. Imagination exists, but is tempered by necessity. Life is defined by resilience, adaptation, and careful attention to both environment and community. Beneath these visible hardships, subtler pressures continue. Emotional strain, social expectation, and invisible labor quietly shape thought, action, and village life. Generations grow under these pressures, learning caution, persistence, and endurance before freedom or ease is possible. Life as a peasant in medieval Europe was brutal, unrelenting, and shaped by forces both visible and unseen. Every day demanded endurance, skill, and constant attention. From the cold mornings to the long nights, from the demands of animals to the weight of social hierarchy, survival was never guaranteed. Yet, amidst the hardship, there were fleeting moments of comfort. A warm fire, a shared meal, a song, or the first light of dawn. Small glimpses of joy that reminded peasants of life beyond labor. Their resilience, adaptability, and quiet courage carried families through generations, leaving a legacy of strength that rarely makes it into history books. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the daily life of medieval peasants. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to Sleeping History for more relaxing stories from the past. Leave a comment telling us which part of medieval life surprised you the most. And now, it's time to rest. Good night, and may your dreams carry you to faraway times and places.